5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hey guys, welcome to MB Tech Talk and my name's Matt. So in this video I'm going to show you how to configure active passive high availability on a Palo Alto virtual next generation firewall using VMware Workstation. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell to get notified every time I post a new video. So what is Palo Alto Firewall Active Passive High Availability? Well, high availability provides redundancy and business continuity by eliminating a single point of failure by adding a second Palo Alto firewall to the topology. This would mitigate a total loss of service, allowing the passive firewall to take over the active role if the primary firewall was to fail. Firewall configurations are synchronized using HA interfaces. This includes network, object, policies, certificates, and session tables. But note, not all configurations are synced, including management interface configurations, HA settings, logs, and ACC information. So how does active passive HA actually work? Well, one of the Palo Alto firewalls actively manages the traffic, while the passive device is ready to move into the active state in the event of a failure. Both active and passive firewalls share the same configuration settings, and if a path, link, system or network failure occurs, the passive firewall transitions into the active state, seamlessly taking over the active role and enforces the identical policy to ensure network security. Active passive HA is supported in virtual wire, layer 2 and layer 3 deployments. So before we start configuring the Palo Alto active passive HA, we need to make sure we understand the lab prerequisites. Make sure you have the second Palo Alto firewall OVA imported into VMware Workstation with a management interface configured and on the same subnet as your existing Palo. Make sure their virtual networking is all set up. If you've not completed the Palo Alto VMware Workstation Lab, then please watch that video first, as it is a prerequisite. I'll add the link to the description below. Next, we need to make sure that both the Palos are running the same PanOS software version, that they both have identical licenses. So in my lab, I'm using VM50 eval licenses. The application URL and threat databases need to match and they need to be up to date. Make sure both Palo Alto VM series are running on the same VMware Workstation PC, and also that the Palos have the same number of CPU cores. Okay, so in this lab, the control link, which is HA1, will be configured as a layer 3 interface using the existing management interfaces. The control link is used to exchange hellos and heartbeats using ICMP along with HA state information to confirm the firewalls are operational, and is also used to sync routing and user ID information between the management planes and to sync configuration changes to the peer firewall. The data link, which is HA2, will be configured using a layer 2 HA interface type using Ethernet 1/4. The data link is used to sync sessions, forwarding tables, IPSAs, and ARP tables. So I'm going to configure HA backup links for both the control HA1 and data HA2 interfaces, as if the control link was to fail, this would cause the firewall to enter a split brain scenario. This is when the passive firewall misses heartbeats from the active firewall and presumes the firewall has gone down, but in fact the active firewall is still functioning. The passive firewall starts firewall services that are already running on the active firewall, hence the term split brain. So by configuring these backup interfaces, we can mitigate this happening. Okay, so before we move into the lab, let's quickly review the networking on each of the Palo Alto firewalls within VMware Workstation. So let's just open up the first Palo and go to settings, and let's just have a look at these network adapters. So network adapter 1 effectively is the management interface, which is bridged to the home network. Network adapter 2 is also bridged to the home network. This is the outside or external interface. Network adapter 3, this is the trusted or LAN interface and is mapped to VMnet 3. Network adapter 4 is the DMZ interface, and this is mapped to VMnet 4. This isn't used in the lab, but it is the baseline configuration. So that's what we need to have on the second Palo. So if we open that up, we just need to check the settings are the same. So they're identical. So that is a prerequisite. Next thing we need to do is add 3 more interfaces to be used with the high availability interfaces in the Palo Altos. So we need to open up virtual network editor as administrator, and then we'll add these extra VMnets. So first of all, we just add a network, and we're just going to go to the next one in the sequence, which is 5. Click OK. We're going to turn DHCP off, and then we're just going to give it an IP address of 1.1.1.0, and then add another network, and then we can do VMnet 6, and then OK. And then we can give this another unique IP subnet, and then we can add and turn DHCP off, and then we can add another network, and that is going to be VMnet 7, and again we're going to give it a unique subnet, turn DHCP off, so this is going to be 3.3.0, and then we can apply that. So that gives us the 3 extra interfaces. And then now what we can do is go back to the Palo VMs, go to settings, and then we can add those 3 network adapters. So when we boot them up, they're going to be available for us. So if we click add, and we go network adapter, finish, and then we're going to go to VMnet 5, so we're going to map it to VMnet 5, and then we're going to add another one, network adapter, finish, and this is going to be 6, so custom 6, and then we're going to add network adapter, finish, and this is going to be 7, and then click OK. So if we go back in and just review that, so we've got management interface, external interface, internal interface, DMZ interface, and we've got, let's say, HA 1 backup, HA 2, and HA 2 backup. So now we need to repeat this on the second firewall. So if we open it up, go to settings, and we just do the same again. So add network adapter, finish, and then we're going to assign it to a custom VMnet, which is 5, then add network adapter, finish, and then we're going to add that to 6, and then add network adapter, finish, custom, and then 7. Okay, so we're just going to review that. Okay, so management, external, internal, DMZ, HA1 backup, HA2, HA2 backup. So that's the interfaces all added. Then we can move on to the lab now. It's best to get all the virtual networking out of the way, so we don't need to shut down the Palos later on. But also what we need to do is we need to edit the Vmx file to make sure that the virtual device matches the rest of the existing NICs. So we'll do that next. Okay, so in order to edit the Vmx file, we need to go to the virtual machine folder and find the .vmx file. So if we go into the first Palo and look for the .vmx, and I'm going to edit this with Notepad++. You can just use Notepad or any other text editor to do this. And if you scroll down and we take a look at the existing Ethernet interfaces, you can see that the virtual device for Ethernet 0 and 1, etc. are configured with Vmx Net 3. So if I just copy that, and if we go down and we look at the other interfaces, so it's going to be 4 and 5 and 6. If you look at the this Ethernet 4 virtual device is set to E1000, so we need to change that to match the other interfaces, and the same for the other two interfaces. There's one there and there's one there. And then once you've done that, just hit save, and then you can close that, and then we can just repeat the same process on the second Palo Alto. So .vmx file, edit with notepad, and then I'm just going to look for the Vmx Net 3, which is there. It should be already in my clipboard, but just in case, now I need to go and find anything with E100 in. So there's one there. So paste that. There's one there. I think for some reason this file hasn't put it into order, so there's one there. I'm going to do that one first, and then I'm going to come back down because I can work this one out quite quickly. So, and that, and then that's that done, and then hit save. So that's now edited, because if you don't do that, the Palo Alto VM series just won't boot. They all need to, all the interfaces, all the virtual device Ethernet interfaces need to match Vmx Net 3. Otherwise, you're going to be having problems booting the firewall up. So now we can move on to the lab and start configuring the interfaces. Okay, so I've logged into the primary firewall. You can see I've given it a new device name so that we can easily distinguish between the active and passive firewalls. The management IP address is 192.168.21.21. The passive firewall, I've done the same, and it has a management IP address of 192.168.21.22. So back at the active firewall, what I'm going to do is enable the high availability widget by going to System and High Availability. This will give the dashboard a traffic light style HA health status. We'll be able to see this a bit later on, but now we're going to go into the network tab. The HA1 interface will be using the out-of-band management port, whereas the HA2 will be using an inbound port. So we're going to use Ethernet 1/4. So if we click on that and put a comment in, which is HA2, and then change the interface type to HA, and just close that and click OK. Now we need to go to device and high availability. And under the setup area, we're going to click edit, so the gear icon, and we're going to enable HA. I'm just going to put a group ID in as 1. Active passive is already checked, and enable config sync is already ticked by default. The peer HA1 IP address is 192.168.21.22, and then we can click OK. If we go over to the control link section and click the gear icon, you can see that the management port has already been selected. If you do the drop down box, there's a little description here. It says non-dedicated out-of-band management interface for HA1. So that again has been enabled by default. What we'll do now is go to the data link HA2. So we should be able to choose the Ethernet 1/4 that we just configured. We don't need to put an IP address in here. It's effectively a layer 2 interface. And then what we need to do is go to the election settings. Now in this lab I'm going to configure preemption, which I'm going to demonstrate that the preemption. So the firewall with the lowest number has the highest priority and always becomes the active firewall if it's available. So I'm just going to leave this at 100 and then just tick preemptive and then just click OK. So and then the next thing we need to do is just check the dynamic updates and just see what's downloaded or installed. Just have a mental note of this, because these need to match on both the active and passive firewalls. So that part's done. Now we can go over to the passive firewall and do the configuration there. Okay, so on the passive Palo Alto, we're going to go into the network tab, and we're going to go to Ethernet 1/4, and then we're going to change that to HA like we did on the primary. Click OK, and then we go to the device tab, and we're going to go into high availability, go to setup, and under the HA, enable the HA, put the group ID in, and now we're going to put the active firewalls management IP address in, which is 192.168.21.21. Click OK, and then just check that the management port is set, which it is for the control link HA1. Go to data link HA2, and then we're going to select the Ethernet 1/4 and then click OK. And then in the election settings, you've got to make sure you do this. We're going to put this up to 110. So this makes it the passive firewall. So it's got the least priority. So the highest number is the least priority. So, and then just don't forget to tick the preemptive there and click OK. So we can click commit on that one and let that do its job. And then we can go back over to the active one and click commit there. So if we go back to the dashboard, once this commit has successfully completed, you'll see that the high availability widget now shows the all the status, the health of the high availability interfaces, the peer, the apps, and so on. So we're just going to let that do its thing, and then we're going to come back to it once it's in a state that we can actually move on. Okay, so now we can see at the dashboard that the firewalls have initialized and they've communicated, got all the configuration information they require, and now in the high availability widget we can see the different statuses. So going from the top here, so we can see the mode is active passive. This local firewall is active. The peer firewall, so the passive firewall, which is 192.168.21.22, is in the passive state, which is what we're expecting. The running config is not synchronized yet, so we can click on this link here and that will sort that out for us, and we just click yes, and as you can see the synchronization is in progress. App ID version matches, threat version matches, antivirus version matches, the PanOS version is the same, and also we've got a mismatch on the Global Protect version. So if we look here down on the dashboard, we can see it's 5.0.0. If we go over to the passive firewall, let's go to the dashboard and let's enable the widget here as well. Just for continuity, and you can see the same information, but it's just the opposite way around. And what we're going to do is just go and check at the Global Protect agent is actually not downloaded. So if we went to device and Global Protect, we could click on that, and what we need to do, if this is the first time you've done this, is just do check now. This should get download all the available versions from Palo Alto, and what we're going to need to do is make sure that the same version is activated on this firewall, and then hopefully once that's done, we'll be able to go back to the primary one and just refresh this, and there we go. So the running config is now synchronized and the Global Protect version now matches. So that is the basic active passive configuration. We're in a good position now to move on to the next steps in the lab, and let's do that now. Okay, so let's perform a basic failover test to demonstrate preemption on the active passive firewalls. So if we go to the Windows 10 client and open up a command prompt, and then I'm going to ping the default gateway, which is 192.168.21.254, which is the router on the outside interface of the firewall, and just confirm we've got connectivity, which we have. So if we go back to the active or primary firewall, we can still see it's in the active state. What we're going to do is suspend this firewall by going to the device tab, high availability, and then operational commands, and then suspend local device. Click OK. If you go back to the Windows 10 client, see the ping drop, and if you go back to the dashboard, you can see that now this primary firewall is in the suspended state. Check the network tab, the interfaces have gone down, and if we make our way over to the passive firewall and then just refresh the screen, you can see the passive firewall has now become the active firewall, and the peer device is in a suspended state requested by myself. So we're still pinging here. Just restart that ping just to see. So yeah, it's still pinging. And if we go back to the active firewall, and what we're going to do is go back to the device tab, back to high availability operational commands, and now we're going to do make local device functional. So what we should see is now this is initializing, leaving suspended state. So if we go back to the passive firewall and we refresh, it's still local, interfaces are still up. It does take a little while, but however, while this is going through the failover process, we still got communication. There is no traffic, no traffic's being dropped. Still got comms out to the default gateway. And if we refresh, still in the passive state on the primary firewall, and the interfaces are still showing down. Just keep refreshing, and eventually it will take over the active role. And there we go, interfaces are back up. So now this active firewall or primary firewall has now taken the active role. This is because preemption has been configured, and this firewall has a higher priority, which is the lower number. So if we went to device, high availability in general, and then we went to election settings, you can see that this device priority is 100, preemptive is enabled. And if we went over to the passive firewall, I went to the same settings, device, and then election settings, this has got a higher number, which means that it's got a lower priority. So that means that the active firewall will always be the active firewall if it's online. So this has demonstrated preemption. Okay, next we're going to take a look at link monitoring and link groups. This is a firewall feature that monitors the link states of the single interfaces or group of interfaces. So the link monitoring can be configured to initiate HA failover if any of the links are down, or some of the links are down, or even if all the links are down. So what we need to do is go over to the device tab, high availability and link and path monitoring. As you can see by default, link monitoring is enabled by default and the failure condition is set to any. I'm going to add 2 link groups. So click add, and I'm going to give this a name, critical WAN links, and then I'm going to select Ethernet 1/1. We've only got one WAN interface or external interface, so I can only choose one. But maybe you want to add your DMZ interface into here. If you had an externally accessible web server or something, some scenario like that, you could add that interface in there, and then click OK. And then what we need to do, just for demonstration purposes, I will add a one for the LAN link as well. So this critical LAN links, and then I'm going to add Ethernet 1/2, which is our trusted interface. Now the HA settings won't synchronize over to the passive firewall, so I'm going to commit that one. And what we're going to do is then head over to the passive firewall, just to show you that the HA settings don't synchronize. So going over to the passive firewall now, as you can see, they're not there, so you're going to need to manually add these. So it was critical WAN links, add the interface Ethernet 1/1, and then the critical LAN links, and then Ethernet 1/2. Click OK and then commit that. Now while that's doing that, we go back to the active firewall, and in order to emulate a link failure, we have to go to VMware Workstation and go to your primary Palo Alto VM and go to the settings, and we need to identify the outside interface, which will be the second adapter in the configuration. And then under the device status, if you untick connected and then click OK, now when we go back to the firewall, should detect at the interface. So as you can see, it's detected that the HA1 group 1 link group critical WAN links failure, one or more links are down, and you can see this firewall is now in the non-functional state because the link is down. So this is the active firewall. So if we went over to the passive firewall, these interfaces have come up. This has become active, and this is taken over the primary role. So that demonstrates how link monitoring works. And obviously what you need to do is go back to your your VMware Workstation settings, and go back to the settings and then reconnect that interface, and then click OK. And that now should go back the other way and see that the interfaces have come back up. So starting to move from initial to passive state, and then this should go back to being the active firewall because of the preemption that we configured earlier. So we give it a few more seconds and this will come back over. It does take a wee while, but eventually it will go back over. So you can see the interfaces have gone down on the passive firewall now. And then if we refresh this, these have come back up on the primary firewall. So we are now back to where we were where the primary firewall is now active. In the final HA testing, we're going to remove the link group monitoring and configure path monitoring. So path monitoring allows you to monitor a critical IP address or group of IP addresses with configurable match conditions using ping. This could be quite useful if the external interface is up but the upstream device is not responding and would like to fail over to a passive firewall in a different location. So I'm going to use the add virtual router path, which will use VR1 to determine the best route to get to the upstream IP address. In this test, I'm going to use my home router's IP. So from the active firewall under the device tab, high availability, link and path monitoring, we're going to select all these link groups and delete them. And we're going to add a path group, and we're going to select the add virtual router path. And from the drop down box, select VR1 and then add a destination IP. So I'm going to add the default gateway, which is the router 192.168.21.254, and then click OK. And then we're going to commit that. Now again, this won't copy or synchronize the configuration to the passive firewall, so we need to go over here and to do the same. So delete the link groups and then add a new virtual router path. Again, we're going to select the VR1 and we're going to add the destination IP of the router, which is the default gateway, and then click OK and then commit. So if we go back to the active firewall, so this is the active firewall, and then we go back to the device. So here we got path group is VR1, type is virtual router, any failure condition, and a destination IP that it's going to ping is 192.168.21.254. So we're going to do exactly the same test we did before. We're going to use the VMware application to disable the connection to the Palo virtual machine. So if we go back over here and go to the primary Palo Alto VM and go to settings, and then find the network adapter 2 again, uncheck connected and click OK. That will now disconnect that interface, and now you can see on the passive firewall that the local firewall is non-functional due to a path down. So HA group 1 path group VR1 failure, one or more destination IPs are down, and go over here and look at the dashboard, and this is now taken over. So exactly the same scenario because of preemption. If we were to go back to the Palo VM and re-enable the interface, click OK, then the this would kick off the active passive HA failover, and the active or primary firewall will become the master firewall. So just refresh that, and after a while this will fail over and do exactly what we expect it to do. So it's going through the states now, initial to passive, and then eventually we've seen this before, it will go back to the primary active role once it's initiated and become active. The interfaces will come up at the same time, but yeah, you get the idea. Exactly the same as the other testing we've done, just using a different type of monitoring. So instead of using interfaces, we've used path monitor, which is a cool feature. So ultimately that has completed the lab, the testing. The next thing I'm going to go into is setting up the backup interfaces. So at the moment we have just got a HA1 interface, which is using the management port here, and then HA2, which is using Ethernet 1/4. What I would like to do is just demonstrate how to add redundancy onto those interfaces to avoid that kind of split brain scenario that we talked about at the beginning. You know, in the event of losing this HA1 interface, this could potentially go into a split brain scenario. So we'll move on to that next and see how we get on. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to configure HA1 and HA2 interface redundancy. So let's go and review VMware Workstation Virtual Networks. So you need to go and head over to your virtual network editor and then run as administrator. And we're just interested in the last two interfaces that we created, so it should be 6 and 7. So 6 will be HA1 backup and 2 will be 7 will be HA2 backup. So just taking a note of the IP 2.2.2 for HA1 backup, and then click OK, and then we go back to the passive firewall. We go to network. And so Ethernet 1/5 is currently set as a tap, interface tap, so we need to change that to a HA interface and click OK. And then Ethernet 1/6 is going to be the other, so that's going to be HA2 backup. Just commit that one, and ultimately that will sync over to the passive firewall. But obviously the interfaces will be down anyway. But there you go. So the HA is now configured on the passive, and they're up on the active firewall. So next thing we need to do is go to the device tab, and we need to go to high availability and then the general tab. Under the control link, so HA1 backup, we're going to be using Ethernet 1/5, and the IP address is going to be 2.2.2.1, and then 255.255.255.0. Obviously, this is this subnet's too big really for this kind of setup. You could use a /30 for just 2 usable IPs, but just for a demo, this will work fine. And then data link HA2 backup, we're going to select Ethernet 1/6. This is a layer 2 data link, so it's the same as how we configured the other data link HA2. It's just the port's just configured, there's no IP address. Then underneath the setup here, we need to put in the peers backup HA1 address, which is going to be 2.2.2.2, and then click OK, and then we can commit that, and then we're going to go and do the HA configuration on the passive firewall. So again, control link HA1 backup, we're going to be using 1/5, and the IP address is 2.2.2.2, and then 255.255.255.0. Okay, then data link HA2 backup is Ethernet 1/6, and then again underneath the setup we need to put the backup here HA1 IP address, which is going to be 2.2.1. Click OK and commit that. Go back to the active firewall, and we should be able to see we've got the traffic lights here. Now we've got the other interfaces, and there you go. So the interfaces, the backup interfaces, HA1 backup and HA2 backup are now configured. So we've got full redundancy, and if the HA1 management interface was to go down, we would avoid the split brain scenario. So that is how you configure HA1 and HA2 redundancy. That is it. That's completed the high availability active passive lab. If you like the video, then please hit that like button. Okay guys, that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Over the next coming weeks, I will be uploading more videos where I will be sharing more content about Palo Alto Firewall features and technologies and how to configure them. If you like this video, I'm sure you know what to do by now, but just in case you don't, please hit that like button below and share with your friends, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell to get notified every single time I post a new video. If you have any ideas of video content you want me to create, please put them in the comments below, as I would love to hear your feedback on any aspect of my channel. Please keep watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.